HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Chai Pani Restaurant Group.
This week on Meat and Three, it's our season 4 finale, and we're sharing some of our greatest kitchen joys.
Maybe most people consider making it too much work or too messy, but this is the food that's worth the work and worth the wait.
You always know where the thing is because you put it away the right way the first time.
You just sort of stand there and, with your hand on your hip and one leg outstretched, glass of wine in your hand, staring into the refrigerator going, okay, speak to me.
Oh yeah, what are you doing with the celery tonight?
I'm making a simple syrup for a gin cocktail with the celery. And I also found a recipe for a celery soup that's going to use up the celery and the potatoes and some of that dill that we still have hanging out in there.
Tune in and be inspired to find the joy in your kitchen. And don't forget to subscribe to Meat and Three wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on the Heritage Radio Network. Hey guys, it's September 10th, 2019. This is the first episode of our live fall season. I'm Jimmy Carbone. I'm the host here on the Heritage Radio Network. We have a special show today. We just finished the 10th annual Pig Island event in Brooklyn, and 2 of the chefs are here. And let's go around the room and introduce each other, because we're talking about the Made in Mexico cookbook, about some of the great chefs that are part of the Mexican community in New York City.
So I'm Danny Mena. So I'm a chef of used to be Hecho en Dumbo, and now a restaurant here in Bushwick called La Loncheria.
And you've got your book out. What's it called?
It's called Made in Mexico, the cookbook.
All right, and it's a special book. We're going to talk about that. Everybody else, let's go through.
I'm Arik Torren. I am the importer of Fidencio spirits, and I import artisanal Mexican juice.
And you're based down in Oaxaca?
Some of the producers I work with are. I'm from Brooklyn.
Cool.
I live in Manhattan now. Don't tell anybody.
And another chef.
Cenobio Canalizo. I'm from the chef from Morgan's Brooklyn Barbecue here in Brooklyn. So we hear everything of neighbors here.
Great. And I just want to give a big shout out to everybody in this room. I mean, Pig Island's an important event. It's the 10th year that we did it. Danny, you started doing it in 2011, either at Hecho en Dumbo or La Loncheria. You've been there. In the last couple of years, you've been pouring Mezcal as well.
Yeah. I mean, that first time we started off, and it's a pretty exciting event. A lot of people come, a lot of meat. We used to get the whole pigs and used to break them down and try to do something. I always my goal is to cook it there. To me, it's like we have a grill, we got a man and a pig, and it's kind of like mano a mano, and see what you can do there. And there's a lot of cooking on the spot, people waiting. The grill gets hot, it gets too cold, the wind starts blowing. Last time the wind was really blowing. And it's so much fun. So kind of an exciting.
What was the dish that you guys served this year at La Loncheria?
So this year we did there's a dish that's kind of called pokchuk, which is a Yucatecan dish, which is basically like smoked pickled pork. Usually it's sliced very thin. So what we did is we pickled it for like 4 days, kind of like a brine, but with a lot more like sour orange and like some vinegar. And then we cooked it on the grill for so we got there around 9 a.m, and by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the pork was coming out really nice.
Wow. I spent all day reading through your Made in Mexico cookbook. It's being launched very soon in New York City. I just want to give a big shout out. Rizzoli Books, Made in Mexico, the cookbook. Danny Manier. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And Cenobio, so you're the chef at Morgan's Brooklyn Barbecue. Backstory is that restaurant's been there for a while in Prospect Heights on 7th Ave and Flatbush. And last year, a great restaurant family took it over, and you've been the chef. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Morgan's and the dish that you made at Pig Island.
Yeah, so basically, we took over the restaurant last year. And I participated in 3 events in king ribs and brisket, and I really like it. I think one of my favorite events here is on Pig Island. Like open doors, and it was perfect parking. Was everything, and really nice people. It's like everybody was enjoying, and like basically like people's like everybody was so happy in the line. Like waiting for the tacos. So this year, I served it my first time on Pig Island this year, and I did something which is I combined it kind of like Texas, like Southwestern taco. So my idea was like, okay, I gotta do something. I want to do something like I want everybody to be enjoyed, like fresh, like the weather and everything. So I did it a pulled pork taco. With corn tortillas and some grilled pineapple, and I was garnished with some radishes and fresh cilantro with some smoked paprika vinaigrette. It was really good, and I'm so happy that everybody loves it. You
had a great presentation too. You had a whole roasted pig.
Yeah, actually, yes. I it was so funny the day when they told me, it's like, hey, we have a pig for you. I went to pick him up. It was not there. It's like somebody else took it. But so I called my preparers immediately. It's like, hey, I want, get me a pig here, get me a pig there. But thank God, like, Jimmy, thank you very much actually for you get it for the next day. It was like right on time, and I was so happy the way how I cook it. I do like kind of like different ways, different ways. I smoked my my porks like for 14, 16 hours, and so to be ready for the next day of the event. And I have like a pig around 95 pounds on top of the grill, and open doors was perfect. Like everybody was so happy, like taking pictures, and I was pulling actually the meat from the pork in the grill and do the tacos.
Yeah, that's been pretty popular. And then Arik. Say your name, man.
Yeah, Arik. Yeah.
Arik, you gave me a hard time. I'm known for mispronouncing.
Everyone's known for mispronouncing my name.
So you're the Mezcal guy. Talk about how you know Danny and how you guys work together.
I know Danny because Danny's the Mezcal guy too. He's got his brands Mezcals de Leyenda and Peloton, and I started importing. We launched Fidencio Mezcal 10 years ago, and since then we started working with other producers in other categories and other places throughout Mexico, and really enjoying spreading the love and the flavors.
Well, Danny, we've been together so long. You did 9 years at Pig Island, but it was 3 years ago in 2016. Your idea was to do a Mezcal y Barbacoa event.
Yeah, like there's such great food all over Mexico, and the combination of like mezcal. So mezcal typically, gets cooked in a pit underground, the agave hearts, and that's what gives it kind of its distinct flavor. And so we were trying to find a way to like do this event that, I love doing Pig Island and all the events that kind of Jimmy puts on, but really to do something that's a little more traditional to kind of Mexico in the style of food. And we're like, what better way than doing like barbacoa, which basically means like cooking in a pit underground, which is how you cook the agave, how you kind of make mezcal, that at the same time do and get some really great chefs. And it was a fantastic event out there right on the water. We had a really good turnout, so that was a lot of fun to organize.
And since it's a beer show, let's talk a little bit about you guys importing mezcal and also the craft lager scene coming out of Mexico.
Yeah, so I mean, craft lager in Mexico is starting to really kind of blow up. I think, like many places, New York kind of in the United States definitely was taking the lead. And Mexico, we had one craft beer that I don't know if anybody remembers called Casta. And this was from like the late 90s. And someone just told me that they were completely defunct. But then you're starting to see a lot of different brands. Northern Mexico has a lot of different kind of craft beers. And then, Arik, 2-3 years ago, you brought in Allende?
Allende, yeah, which has some really beautiful products.
So he did that, and then and now I'm about to bring in a little bit north of Mexico, this town called San Juan del Rio, which is in Querétaro. And there they make a Bock and a Helles Bock. And so these kind of lagers that are really rooted in Germanic kind of beers, which is the influence of Mexico. Like Mexican beer came from Germanic styles. And so like we have Bohemia, of course, which is even the name of it. It was very, very pronounces that very much.
Oh, that's great. And we actually, last winter, that style is becoming more popular. Inneborough made a beer called Dead Prez, which was a Vienna-style lager this past winter, which was my favorite beer of the winter. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. We did try the Allende beers 3 years ago.
Oh, nice.
They're more of like the amber lager, Vienna lager style that you brought in.
And there was also an IPA that was really cool, really delicious. And the Vienna malts that was part of the brown ale.
And then did you have one that was made with agave syrup?
Yeah,
or
the agave lager. That's they're taking roasted piñas of espadín from Oaxaca and putting it in the fermentation. So it's a co-fermentation. It's a really cool beer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's great. A lot of the good things are coming through you guys.
Definitely
And,
not traditional.
Let's jump now to the cookbook. So Danny, I'm really proud of, again, Made in Mexico book, Rizzoli Publishing. It's definitely my book of the year. I'm going to get it for friends for Christmas. There's some things you say in the book that really stand out to me. First, I want to say that this is an amazing book. Even though Danny's a restaurant owner, he's not pushing his products. He's in Mexico City. Every recipe, he also references a restaurant there that made it. So this, to me, is the ultimate book. When I look at it, the photography is like, I want to go to Mexico City. I want to go to all these places. And what the hell am I doing with my life, Danny?
What are you doing? Everybody's got to go to Mexico. I mean, and as much love as Oaxaca gets and all these kind of little towns in Yucatan and all that, and of course everybody on the East Coast goes to like Tulum, and everybody on the West Coast goes to Puerto Vallarta. But Mexico City is just such an amazing city right now. Like, just the food that's coming out, the chefs, the style. Like, there's so much that, being raised from Mexico, and when I first kind of came to the U.S., I always made the mistake of saying, well, in Mexico we do this, and in Mexico we do that. And somebody from northern Mexico was like, whoa. In Mexico, in your town, with your group of friends, yes, you have the corn tortillas, they're done in this way. So, when we opened Metro and Dumbo, it was a Mexico City-inspired restaurant. And though Mexico City means kind of nothing in a sense because there's food that comes from all over the country comes to Mexico City, there's still like a sensibility on the way that it gets plated. Like a simple term like michelada in Mexico, which is a beer with like a shandy is beer with like lime. In Mexico, michelada means lime and beer only. And if you say a cubana, michelada cubana, then it has the spices. But if you go almost anywhere else in Mexico, the michelada is the one with spice, and then they call it like a chelada, and then so it's interesting. Like, so just like that, there's these little things about what makes Mexico City kind of really unique, and so that's kind of what the point of the book was, to really talk about these great restaurants that just are so much fun to eat at.
No, and a couple. You said Mexico City, the city of immigrants. I mean, it's quite a cosmopolitan city.
Yeah, I mean, from the history of Mexico, I mean, obviously there was the Spaniards that came and kind of colonized, but there's been, Lebanese. There's a huge Chinatown in Mexico City. I mean, you have a lot of expats from the United States coming through, and there are people from all over. I mean, right now, a huge influx of people from Argentina, and it's really an interesting kind of.
I feel like the kids that have trust funds, they're going to Mexico City now, right? It's a good place.
It is.
But I want to read the book. There's. What I like about the book, Danny, is that to me it's totally your voice, and we don't read from cookbooks too often. But the first 2 lines of your introduction, when I read that this afternoon, my first thought was, "Wow, that's Danny's voice." So I want to hear you read the first 2 lines in your own voice.
I can really hear my voice, so
because otherwise I can imitate you.
Please, no, not on air. It starts off introduction. Mine isn't the typical chef's backstory. I was a picky eater as a child and didn't care about or even much like food. Eating could be a chore for me. That said, though, food is integral to everyday life in Mexico City, and that it was hard to avoid absorbing information about it. You know what I mean? Like, it was interesting. Like, growing up, my mom would always, my mom's an American, and so my dad is from like the small little town in Mexico. So he was like the very traditionalist when it came to food, that he always needed 3 courses. You first start off with the soup, then you had your kind of main course, and then he wasn't much into dessert, but he would eat his Jell-O or something. And so my mom really learned how to make like the basic rice and the soups and all that. And so he was really like satisfied with her type of cooking. But I never really appreciated. I really didn't know. I'd go out to restaurants. I'd always eat the same thing. I wouldn't want any sauce or anything like that. I remember one time as a kid, I was all at my friend's house, and we were probably like 15 years old. And it's a big group of like 12 of us, and everyone's sitting around eating chilaquiles, which is a dish basically of stewed chips. They're like tortilla chips stewed in a sauce, and which is funny right now. Like the more I analyze it, the hotter the sauce is, the better the chilaquiles. And that's the only merit of if it's good or if it's not good. If that's not hot, the chilaquiles, it doesn't matter how good the sauce is and how much flavor, whatever, it's got to be spicy. And so...
what's better when you're hungover? Menudo or chilaquiles?
I'm a chilaquiles type of guy. It's, I don't know, that spice and the chips. And,
yeah.
That's
and Cenobio, what about you? So Dan's from Mexico City. Where are you from?
I'm from Puebla. Basically like 2 hours to Mexico City, you know. So I'm coming from a little town in Puebla, and I came here a couple years ago. And my first job, you know, when I started, I remember I was washing dishes because I was cooking in Mexico. You know, my mom and my dad is like always like we never go out like eat in a restaurant. So she always cooks. So I always watching, and I always like to cook, you know, for my brothers, for my sisters. So when I come to this country, I was like, wait a second. I'm washing dishes. I know how to cook. And I started working my first job at a Western restaurant. So it's kind of like it's Mexican and like Texas style food. And I was like, I can do better than that. Like, you know, like Danny said, I was like, I can do it than that. In Mexico, I used to be doing like that, you know, but here I work with a good chef, you know. It was a 3-star restaurant here in New York City. And I learned everything, like all the recipes. So basically, I started from washing dishes, do desserts, do pastry, do salads, and the line cook, and to come out a chef. And my favorite food, you know, like I said, the chilaquiles is one of my favorite item. Chilaquiles, the mole, and that's why I decided to do the big island like a little taco, you know, like kind of like combine it with the pineapple, kind of like a tacos al pastor style, which is like, you know, like a little bit kick with the pineapple, not with the, you know, like tacos al pastor, like they have like more spices on it, but like, so I tried like to combine something a little bit like that, you know. That's why I did it. This big.
It was a great dish, man. Cheers. And we're toasting the mezcal. Arik, what mezcal are we drinking first?
This is
a great afternoon drink. I'll tell you.
I agree. This is La Venenosa Raicilla. So this is a mezcal in the general sense, and this category is called Raicilla. This La Venenosa is called Sierra del Tigre, and it's a really small producer that we work with, high elevation, clay pot distillation, agave and echidnas, and a very weird spirit because long fermentation. It's funky, and what do you think of it?
I love it. I mean, it's dry. Like it. Well, how would you describe it to someone? I mean, Leo's here, one of your reps. No, he's not on. you had a guy. It's so cool. Arik came in and didn't realize that he was going to bring something to drink, and he had some people come.
Major foul. Right?
But I don't really know how to talk about mezcal. I like it. To me, it tastes like mezcal. It doesn't taste. There's no oak or anything. Mm-hmm. But what is that flavor? It's uniquely. Is that just fermentation?
This guy is one of the most oddball bottles in my book. And, you know, everything is a culmination of everything. So when we talk about why does this taste this way, who's making it? This is made by Don Luis. What is he making? This is clay pot distilled agave and echidnas done in his place, in his equipment. All natural fermentation or spontaneous or wild. And because of his process, it goes through a very long fermentation. So this particular thing has nearly, you know, between 18, 21 days of fermentation, which is crazy. And all these things that would normally be a flaw just come out to be really beautiful in this very amazing spirit.
No, it's so clean and refreshing. There's like some nice flavors.
You know, this one especially, but all kind of mezcals have a lot of acidity. And it's something that like, it can be too much and it's something they kind of battle. But why it pairs so well, and it just, I mean, immediately it can be dry, but it makes you salivate so much. And this one has, you know,
really nice acidity.
Uh-huh. You know, and back to the book. I mean, I know that 20 years ago we weren't able to get these mezcals in a typical bottle shop in New York or restaurant. But the same thing with food ingredients. Danny, you said, trying to promote your book, Made in Mexico. You said one of the biggest challenges was finding the ingredients when you wanted to find authentic Mexican food.
Yeah, I mean, that's something, like I went to a conference in Spain probably like 10 or 11 years ago, and we had just opened at Dumbo, and the people were coming to me, it's like, man, there's no good food, and there's no good Mexican food here in Spain, you should open up a restaurant. And, you know, I thought about it for a while because to move to Madrid would be one of my highlights in life. But I was looking at their ingredients, and I was like, the avocados were, if they're expensive here in the U.S. and like in Spain, they're like $4 or €4 an avocado. It's like tomatillos, you can't get it fresh. And it's like, if you can't get any of the ingredients, you just can't make good food. You know what I mean? If it's all processed, if it's all canned, like there's just, there's only so much one can do. And that's kind of what it was like in New York, 20 or 30 years ago when Zarella was around and things like that. It was not so easy. Now, obviously we have purveyors for the restaurant, and you can get any type of chili you want. You get any type of ingredient. I mean, there's so much that they can get. But even if you go to, like, I used to get a lot of food at the Essex Market, and there's like a little section there, and they had so many different types of Mexican ingredients that I could use with all that, and like, being just so fresh now with like how good transportation and everything is, that it's really nice and it's fun that I go back to Mexico and I tell my friends about, we're making this with this ingredient, with that ingredient, and my friends are like, what is that? How do I know more here than you there?
They're starting to eat McDonald's, and you're making authentic Mexican. What about Cenobio? What about some ingredients from when you grew up that you wish you had in New York, or that you are able to find?
Yes, a couple, like especially like chiles. Like now in Morgan's, like we have the Texas chili, which is we make it with like different chiles, like mulatto, pasilla, chile de árbol, chipotle. But there's one chile in Mexico where we used to be like growing up. Like my parents is basically we have like a big farm, and we have like all the type of chiles, flowers, fruits, and everything. But the one I'm missing is one chile we call in Mexico. They call chile loco. Like crazy chile loco. And I tried to look everywhere over here, and I never found it. I don't know if you done see anywhere. They call chile loco.
Chile loco, no.
Yeah, and only my town in Mexico, like the town, like I said, like we're close to the volcano, and every time we come to shopping in Jalisco, they don't even have that chile. So my mom, she used to be bringing a basket and like selling by kilo, by pieces, and it's a great chile, and that's the one what I miss it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because also like, and this goes kind of back to like Mexico City, and that you can get a lot of chilies in Mexico City, but the local chilies like a chile loco, or Oaxaca has some specific ones where there's one called chihuacle, which is, and there's the red, the black, and the yellow, and each one of those is the base for one of the 7 base moles. So el mole negro has to have chihuacle negro. El mole amarillo has to have the yellow, and the rojo has to have the red. And it's such an important part of that dish that when you try to make a mole negro here in the United States, if you don't have, that chile, you're missing something. You know what I mean? And so and like that, the chile pasilla that exists in Oaxaca is different than the chile pasilla that you get in, that you get in Mexico, or what we get here. Like I actually found out from one of my purveyors that most of the chilies, like especially like the chile de árbol, which is really similar to the Thai chili, actually are the chili de árbol that they sell me come from China, not from Mexico. So I had to start paying a premium because I was like, no disrespect to like a chili coming from China, but if I'm making Mexican food and I'm using Mexican ingredients, like why would I use like an imported
exactly,
chili?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
So like that, there's a lot of little things that are still missing, and those are things that you could only even really get regionally in Mexico.
And so next month you have some Mexican craft lagers coming in. Can you just tell us again what the brand is?
Yeah, so the beers that we're bringing in is called Jabali. And so it's a Bock and a Helles Bock.
How do you spell it, Danny?
Jabali is Jabali, and it means wild boar. So the idea of these kind of beers is, these are lagers, and but they're all kind of like a Bock is higher proof, and then the Helles Bock just to kind of showcase another highlight, or something that when you want to try to break some barriers. So the Helles Bock is a lighter beer by look. Its color, it's less dark, but it has a substantially higher alcohol content to it. So it's that it doesn't necessarily, just because you see a beer that's light, or just because you see a white spirit, doesn't mean that it's not as complex as like a brown spirit. You know what I mean? And that's kind of that idea that we were playing with.
And what are the steps that you take to import? I mean, you already knew these guys. They want to export to the States. What are some of the things that led to this?
Yeah, the things that led to it was interesting. So my partners for my Mezcal brand, they actually opened up one of the first craft beer bars in Mexico City. And so their partners, they were doing it, had this other beer, and they're a brewery called Tempus. And so they've actually worked with New Belgium, and so they've been making beers for a long time in Mexico, and they just came out with together with New Belgium, they came out with a new one that's it's kind of with a little bit of hibiscus and agave syrup, and kind of playing to what people want now, kind of a lighter, fruitier sort of beer. And so we started talking probably 2 years ago. And they were kind of interested, but they were still making sure that they'd find the right partner, because the United States, like, one of the things that's interesting about like mezcal, like right now, the United States now consumes more mezcal than Mexico does. And because of the size of the United States and because of the economic power that, the people have in the United States, never again will mezcal be consumed more in Mexico than in the United States. You know what I mean? It passes that. So if you're trying to build a brand, like they were doing a lot of work in Mexico, but, taxes are really high and it doesn't make it that easy there. And distribution's a little weird, that they're waiting for the right partner. And so finally we're about to start. So we're going to start New York, we're going to do Chicago, and we're going to do California and kind of get those 3 major markets. And then little by little start expanding to like Texas and Florida. And we'll see where else it can go.
And Arik, what about for you with your brands? In terms of choosing partners in Mexico and bringing those into the States?
Well, it started with Fidencio, and for me that was kind of 13 years ago. Meeting Enrique, the producer, our partner with it, and then kind of blindly going one foot in front of the other until we could figure out how to make a brand, do copywriting, trademarking, and getting things in legally into the United States. In 2012, I saw a post on Facebook about La Venenosa from Esteban Morales, the founder of that brand, and I basically stalked him. And then kind of from there, it led me to realize, or at that point I was already beginning to realize how broad agave spirits are. So you kind of like, it could be you meet a person, you're inspired by a product, you make a relationship, it works out, you start working together, and you start bringing the next thing in. And
you want to hear the easiest recipe for an awesome drink?
Yeah.
Take Danny's Peloton Mezcal, slightly smoky, just put it in your margarita instead of tequila. That's pretty good, right?
It makes it so much better.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you'll never go back to tequila margarita.
Yeah, and then you get the smoke, so that's one less thing you have to add, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
We used to do that at Jimmy's 43. I loved it, man. But we're going to take a short break for just 1 minute. We'll be back on Beer Sessions Radio. All right.
This episode is brought to you by Chai Pani Restaurant Group. From Bombay to Buncombe and Asheville to Atlanta, Chai Pani has extended the love of food, culinary experience, and storytelling to the Southeast. Founded by Meherwani and Molly Irani, Chai Pani Restaurant Group includes 2 locations of Chai Pani, plus MG Road Bar and Lounge, Botiwala, Buxton Hall Barbecue, and their new spice company, Spicewala. Learn more about Chai Pani and watch their documentary series, Cutting Chai, at chaipanirestaurantgroup.com. That's CHAIPANI restaurantgroup.com.
Hey, welcome back to Beer Sessions Radio on the Heritage Radio Network. Check it out, heritageradionetwork.org. There's a big 10th anniversary gala coming up a little later this year, so keep checking it out. heritageradionetwork.org. So Danny Mena, made in Mexico. So what were you saying? Non-native ingredients?
Or native, it's really interesting. Like what ingredients were in Mexico before kind of the Spanish came, and they were like tomatoes and chilies and vanilla, cocoa, all these sort of ingredients that are now we see them in other parts. So Italian food never had tomatoes until after they founded Mexico, or they found the New World, and then at the same time on the other one is like cilantro, which is not native to Mexico, pigs not native to Mexico, things like that now we think they're so such a part of the cuisine, but really cilantro is obviously from the spice trade.
Your book is set up really cool, made in Mexico, but there's one chapter that says why pork, so you're kind of leading into that.
Exactly.
Why pork in Mexico?
Is that the Spanish brought it over, and really Mexicans really took to pork, and now it's like, especially in the southern part of Mexico or middle to all the southern part. I mean, pork is in almost every dish, and like in certain dishes, like I love like tacos al pastor. We're kind of just talking about that, and that's a dish obviously that had the Lebanese influence because it's pork on a spit. But then, of course, as Mexicans, we are the ones who changed it because obviously the Lebanese were not bringing it in with pork. It was not swine that. And then, of course, it has the chilies, which makes it very Mexican. And the pork is a Spanish. So, like, really, Mexican food is kind of a fusion of all these foods in the world. From native indigenous ones that were there, and of course the influence from the Spain and from Lebanese, and there was definitely some Dutch also influence, and then of course French, and so it's really interesting to see how it kind of comes together. Mole. There's all these sort of ingredients that kind of come together, and some of them are very native to Mexico, and some of them are not. And then it all of a sudden now becomes one, and there's no one thinks that.
What
mole
was
is
the indigenous food in Mexico? What was it like before pork came? I mean. What were people
venison?
making?
There was a lot of game, but venison. There were some goats. Wild turkeys was one, but no horses, no beef, no pork. None of those existed until after the Spanish came.
And what did the indigenous people use for cooking fat?
It wasn't much. It was all.
There was no butter.
There was no butter.
No olive oil.
No olive oil. They tried to do olive oil groves in Mexico, and was not the right climate for that. That it wasn't. That's a good question. I don't know exactly. I know, like, for acidity, because like citrus tree was also not native to Mexico. So from the tuna, there's the cactus. The fruit that comes off of it is called the tuna. But there's also another one for like the male. It's called the choconosle, and it's this really incredibly like tart. And this is what they used a lot of times to give you some acidity and to give you some of that balance when you start doing dishes. So I like a soup that was with that, and it was like almost if you had added some sort of vinegar component to it. It was really interesting.
In Cenobio, in Pueblo, you got chilies, you got some pork. What are some other ingredients that you only find there?
It's not the ingredients, like only like in Puebla, like we can find it, like which I try to look like everywhere over here on any wholesales, like even including Mexican markets, which some items I have to tell my mom to ship it, directly to me. They call now you can find it, but like 2 years ago, like papalos. Like papalos is a leaf which you can eat it with any meal, basically, especially with tacos. Like now you go like every taqueria, they have like a big bunch of papalos and you eat it just like that, just like a herbs. And that's before you would never find it over here. And now I started getting little by little. Even I have like the way I have there, like I was say like 8 years ago, I told my mom, I was like, son, I really want some papalos. She's like, okay, how are we going to send it? I was like, you know what? Just try to find the seed and send it to me. So even now I grow that in my backyard. I have that. Like, did you know that it was the papalo?
but it's interesting because like papalo is something you don't see in Mexico City much at all. Only like a few things, and there's a special like torta that's very popular in Puebla.
Like the semita, they need to have the papalo. So if it's no papalo, it's no semita.
Exactly. So semita is like a sandwich with like a special bun that's really you only see in Puebla, and it has this papalo. And papalo, to me, I love the taste of it. But once you take one bite of it, you're going to taste it for the rest of the day.
Yes.
If not even the next day.
Just like the guajes.
Guajes also.
Right. One thing in your book, Danny, you talk about corn and tortillas and masa and where tacos came from. Tell us about where that term taco, the word taco, came from.
It's kind of it's interesting. I mean, the taco, like in the book we talk about like everything is a taco, and it's and at the end of the day, like everything we kind of put together, like whatever whatever. If you get like a fish dish, or if you get carnitas, or even if you get like some mole, you always have tortillas on the side, and you're always kind of making this the dish into a taco. So it's something that the indigenous people of Mexico figured out that if you cook corn with lime and not the citrus lime, but like calcium carbonate, you actually get like a complete amino acid, and so you can live off of the rest of your life just eating corn, like beans and tortillas. But if you're eating corn and
what's the process that makes the masa?
So that is what they call nixtamalization. And so what the process is, basically you have your corn, it's dried, and then you boil it with a little bit of calcium carbonate, which is basically charcoal. So I think originally that's how it kind of started with that, and somehow now they figured it out. But once you cook that, then traditionally, way back in the day, it was always ground by hand. So it was basically this kind of like flat sort of lava stone, and there was like a rolling pin, and that's how they would just mash the...
They call metate.
El metate, exactly.
El metate, yeah. So basically that's the way how you do the tortillas. Like I said, when I was in Mexico, I used to be ground the corn, you dry it, and you cook it. And like now they have like machines, but like before, like with the metate, like you ground it all day and you come out, you make the masa from there. and like every day, like about the tacos, like he said about the tacos. Everything basically you call like taco Mexico, because you're not eating without tortilla. You have tortilla always on the table. So whatever you have, if you have a soup with a piece of meat inside, you take the meat in the tortilla and you do it like your own taco on the moment. When my mom or my sister like making tortillas right in front of me.
How come so many? Well, in your book also, there's a lot of great bakery photos. But why do so many Mexicans that I know in New York eat tortas and semitas, sandwiches? If is that a separate world or? I like sandwiches, but I'm just trying to give you a hard time.
Yeah, of course. I mean, not everything is a taco. 99% it's a taco, but yeah, there's a torta. I mean, the torta is a big also slice of the pie of what people eat. Typically a torta in Mexico is basically a sandwich. Almost always has beans on the bottom, and then you can kind of put anything else that you want to. In every town, like in León, they have some there called guacamayas, and of course you have the semitas from Puebla. But it's still, I think, in comparison to the amount of corn, like in Mexico, corn and tortillas are such a important part of the diet that actually it's subsidized by the government, and you're not allowed to charge a certain amount. So when all of a sudden they say, like, if there's inflation, we're like, okay, now the price of a kilo of tortillas went from $3.50 to $3.75. And can cause like a lot of outrage, but it's controlled that way because it's such an important part. Where bread, of course, does not have.
Like milk used to be regulated in the States.
Exactly, and so that's how which also hurts when people are now trying to use like heirloom corns and trying to make tortillas that are of better quality, because we start taking tortillas for granted. But what makes the taco great is you have three basic ingredients. You have the actual tortilla, you have whatever meat filling, and the salsa. And if one of the three is not good, is not proper, then you're not going to have a good taco. So it's kind of like saying, I'm going to make a really great sandwich, and we got this beautiful roasted like meat that I've been doing for 15 hours. We got these amazing pickles that are local, this handmade mustard, all this, and we're going to put it on Wonder Bread. There goes your Sammy.
That's true.
He's smiling. And Arik, let's talk about distilling or fermenting. So with agave for the mezcal, just walk us through the process of making it, because I was at a symposium yesterday in New York. There was a Oaxaca distiller there as well, this guy Jonathan Barbieri, and he was talking about the challenges of distilling corn or making the mash from corn to make a whiskey. So how is it that mezcal is so successful and coming out so clean, and corn whiskey makers are struggling in Mexico? I don't know.
I think if I was to jump to that part, my only guess, because I haven't tried it, is that experience, the hand of the maker. We're talking about many, many generations of heritage knowledge with most of these traditional producers. And I think whiskey is a new experiment with all your growing pains, with some great successes and failures or challenges in that evolution. I don't think there, to my knowledge, has been some old domestic Mexican whiskey makers or corn whiskey from generations. But the process is really analogous. You have to, you have a source, in this case, agave. Actually, in this case, what's in your glass right now, we poured another bottle. This is Sotol.
We just finished one bottle, now we're on the second bottle. I love this place.
This is something called La Higuera Sotol, and Sotol is made from a plant that is another type of succulent that's not an agave, but it's analogous. So you harvest it, you have a heart, the piña, and then those piñas, whether it's agave or Sotol, they're various types of carbohydrates that have to be broken down to fructose. We use heat. And in both of these cases, we're using, wood roasting. With many traditional, more traditional tequilas, you're using a neutral roast, So you'll have that type of mezcal, tequilas and mezcal, that has their signature, which is not using wood, although there are some, very few, that are doing it with a wood roasted tequila. So you have to have heat, you have to break it down, you have to get to the sugars so the yeast could eat it. Fermentation happens in so many different various ways depending on the place and the maker. Wood vats, hides, cow hides, adobe stone vats, underground vats. So that's a huge variation of traditional, and then as well as more modern ways, whether it's plastic or stainless steel. Distillation. Mexico is amazing. There are staggering amounts of types of stills that are in practice, regardless of the outside world, that are just domestically, internally practiced. So we have people doing many different varieties of clay pot stills and wooden stills, and some of them are tree trunk stills and copper stills, and it's really cool. So all of that comes together to give us this huge rainbow of experiences, which is why, for me, when I started with Fidencio, it's a brand and a project that's all from one man and one place. But as an outsider, as somebody who likes beverage and spirits, and seeing what I was seeing, I was like, wow, this is so much bigger than any one maker can represent. So I started going towards other producers and sharing that space.
Danny, what's the backstory on the Mezcal de Leyenda? I mean, that what you're doing is amazing. So just tell us about, there's different regional mezcals.
Yeah, I mean, the way it kind of got started, so like my partner's from Mexico City, and they started traveling around Mexico and, learning about it. And this was the late 90s, so internet was just getting started. The denomination of origin of mezcal was created in 1994 with NAFTA. So really, even though there's debate on how many hundreds of years ago did they start actually distilling the spirit, in terms of a category, in terms of what people consumed, it's really a very new spirit. And so they were kind of traveling around Mexico, and my partner was in Oaxaca, which is where a lot of mezcal gets produced, and another one was up in Durango, and he came back. It's like, there's mezcal up here. And they're like, no, mezcal's to come from Oaxaca. And so little by little, start traveling around. They met somebody and another friend, and he's like, oh, well, you got to go meet these brothers. Oh, you got to go meet them. You got to go check out what everyone's doing. And little by little, you start to understand, like Puebla was an amazing place where it just became part of the denomination of origin of mezcal, technically, but they've been making mezcal there. I mean, La Mixteca, that region is where they first started to nixtamalize corn, where a lot of like native chilies and corns. Like, it's a really important, like, I call it like the breadbasket of Mexico. And so when we fell in love with mezcal, it was really about talking about, the culture and the traditions of mezcal from every different region. So, in Oaxaca, they can say, for us, this is mezcal, and this is the way we do it, and that's where we're talking about like the different types of fermentation or distillations. And then for someone else in Puebla, they're like, no, this is the good agave, and this is the way you're supposed to do it. And everyone does it in their own sort of way, which makes it all unique. And so by tasting these spirits and, all those sort of changes between the different type of plant, the process, the terroir, which of course takes, is because one of these plants takes 7 to 15 years on average and can take up to 30 or 40. So all those things that come into it.
So it's like grapes for wine.
It's like grapes for wine, and really it's so important that and exactly like, I mean, if you want to classify like even by agave, so like really when you look at mezcal now, it's much more about the varietal, because that really gives you a sense of what you're about to drink. But then the place too. You can have the exact same varietal from 2 different towns or from 2 different states. It's very different. It's like a Pinot Noir from Oregon and what there's in Burgundy. Those are going to be very different flavors, even though it's the exact same grape.
One of your Mezcal de Leyenda's regional mezcals is called Guarana. Guerrero, which to me has the most unusual flavor.
And it's as agaves goes, was one of my favorites. It's really an interesting one, and it's definitely one that is, the nose is very different than the palate. It has a lot of like tropical notes, but then when you drink it, there can be some brine on it. There's a lot of like black pepper. There's some like melon notes. It's really an interesting sort of agave that is one of my favorites, but it's definitely one to round 2.
No, it's great. And
I'm a huge fan.
And I'm really proud of you, Danny, the book Made in Mexico, because from you being a restaurateur in New York City, bringing in some craft beers as well as mezcal, you really, to me, you're representing, the life many of us want to have. And Cenobio, so Puebla, we're talking about agave, other products growing in Puebla. You want to add anything else?
Nah, it's not really. Like, basically, he already talked everything about La Mixteca. That's the only one basically done in Puebla, because that's the one, like, my grandpa, like, my father used to be drinking. And I started drinking here.
What's La Mixteca? What's that?
There was a one mezcal on the town that were we used to be get like in a big pot like that, which basically I never really tasted how they taste, and I find over here because one day they said it to my brother-in-law, and I tasted it was really good. But I think that's is more like a homemade. They're doing like everything homemade in Puebla or part of Puebla.
Yeah. So La Mixteca is a region in there's like Mixteca Alta and Mixteca Baja, the high and the low, but it's a region basically from Puebla and a little bit to Oaxaca. So this is where there was a lot of and so there were the Mixtec indigenous people. They used to live there, thousands of years ago, and so that's why they call that region like La Zona Mixteca.
Before there was state borders, it was that territory for those people. One of the interesting things before Puebla became incorporated into the denomination of origin, so there was this. They didn't have the economic opportunity to export under the label mezcal because they weren't yet in it. So their mezcals were still being made as they always were, but not as much demand on the land. And there were times I remember driving from Oaxaca inside the Mixteca region, and you would see no agave on the mountains as you're driving along the highway. You cross the border into Puebla, and there's peppered with agave all over the place. So it's a really, really rich, beautiful area there.
Great. And last thing, Cenobio, just tell us, so now you guys came in and took over the Morgan's Brooklyn Barbecue in Prospect Heights, Park Slope, Brooklyn. What are some of the things you're changing on the menu?
We have some new items on the menu, basically, and we're gonna add more, because the idea is we try to stake that our brand a little bit more. We added stripped corn, Mexican street corn. We have and the new one we just added on the menu is bacon ribs, smoked bacon ribs. So we do everything over there. We cure in the house. We do everything. Most 99% of our menu, everything is homemade. Everything we make over there, including desserts, all the pastries, all the bread, and everything, sauces, everything like barbecue sauces. We try to also do and selling in a bottle. So actually we selling already in the restaurant, but all that we do in the house. And the new items from the menu, which is more items will be added very soon, on the brunch menu, dinner menu. It's a bunch of other stuff. The idea we doing right now.
And what chilies are you using?
Right there,
the menu there.
I use jalapenos, poblanos, chile de árbol, habanero, pasilla, chile ancho, chipocles, a lot of chiles already in Morgan's, which there was not there before.
You can hear it in his voice, but when Cenobio talks about chilies, he smiles. So, thanks so much for coming out. You guys have been great. Morgan's Brooklyn Barbecue.
Thank you very much for inviting.
This year you were part of Brisket King NYC, Rib King NYC, Pig Island NYC, and Danny La Loncheria, just not too far from here in Bushwick.
Yeah, right here, 3 or 4 blocks away, 41 Wilson Avenue. So it's kind of like a take on a Mexican luncheonette. So we got a lot of tortas, funny enough, and that's the main focus of the. But of course we have tacos and we have a couple of dishes.
What's your favorite tortas?
So I'm
hungry. That's
you're hungry. I know. So we'll do this.
I had mezcal. I'm hungry.
Right now we just did one, and what we did, so with the restaurants, a little more playful, and so we did basically porchetta, and we marinated with a green mole pumpkin sauce, or pumpkin seed sauce, and then we put, and after it gets roasted and everything for about 10 hours, we slice it up, we crisp it up again in the oven to heat it up, and so there's the one I was talking about, this torta called the guacamaya, which is basically a sandwich as you see in León, that it's chicharrón, so crispy pork cracklings, salsa roja, pico de gallo, and avocado. So instead of just doing a simple chicharrón, we did the porchetta, and then we did the pico de gallo, we did the avocado, and so it's a riff on that, and it came out really, really nice.
So you still have to interpret things for the New York City audience.
Yeah, and with the way Mexican food is keeps evolving, when we first opened Hecho and Dumbo, it was all about trying to be really authentic, and I wanted to do food that but now even in Mexico, you're starting to see people being more playful. So the idea, it's something that I've always had a challenge of what is Mexican food, and I can tell you what it's not, but I don't know really what is. And so this torta has the beans, it's like chili. We also pickle some mushrooms, and then we kind of batter and fry them, and it adds this nice kind of crisp. But so we're being very playful, yet at the end of the day, when you're eating the torta, you should say, this is a torta, it's not a sandwich.
So basically you're saying that, I'm not an expert on Mexican food at all, but between the different regions of Mexico and then the different regions of Mexican food in America, we're talking about a lifetime. I think we should just start tasting, right?
That's what we need
Let's
to do.
go eat, man.
That's how you learn about mezcal, about beer, and about food, huh?
And last thing, so pumpkin seeds, is that an indigenous ingredient to Mexico?
That is.
I always forget about that.
Yeah, pumpkins there and squash.
Yeah, and one more item, we have it's coming out on the menu, it was at the second week or the third week of September. There was only for takeouts, we have a menu they call tacos. So they have like a lot of Mexican dishes. Like they have the burrito, they have the quesadilla, they have the semita. We kind of do like only for takeout. We kind of try to do it. Like I think it's gonna work.
Yes. Awesome. Well, this is exciting. Danny, again, made in Mexico by Danny Mena, and it's Mena.
It's Mena.
Mena.
People have a tendency of just because they see it in Spanish, the N, they think it's automatically an Enya, but it literally has to have that tilde on top. If not, it's just like a regular N.
Yeah, and I'm glad the book's out. And the last thing about the craft lager that you're bringing in, what's it called again?
So it's called Jabali. So we'll be seeing that in the market here by middle of October. So it's a nice bock.
And in the last year, I'll tell you, a number of people that are doing import. Everyone was asking last year for a craft Mexican lager. So it must be onto something.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see.
All right, guys. And one more time again. So let's go around the room. Everyone say their name one more time. We're going to say goodnight.
So, thank you, guys. This is Danny Mena.
Arik Torren. Thank you.
Thank you. Cenobio Canalizo.
From Morgan's Brooklyn Barbecue. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining me here on the Heritage Radio Network. Big shout out to engineer Matt Patterson, assistant producer Aaliyah Paps, and I'm Jimmy Carbone. We'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right. Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.